I'm glad we are here. We can talk to each other, and you can stop me when I'm talking as well, as others I mentioned. So the topic is something which I have been curious about for some time. I'm following the debate on this, especially for the last 20 years or so. Turkey's sub-imperialist moment in the Middle East and Africa. And some authors describe this as strategic autonomy. So to what extent Turkey has a strategic autonomy in its foreign relations? So first let me briefly mention about the term, and this is some of the basic definitions. And this term, sub-imperialism, started with Brazilian Marxist Mauro Marini. And he was trying to explain the situation of Brazil in his own country. And Brazil was post-industrializing and then increasing its influence in its own region. So Marini basically was trying to explain the contradictory situation. Brazil at the same time still exploited and controlled by the big, great imperialist powers, but at the same time also using the imperialist tactics and strategy in Latin America towards the other countries which are less developed and less powerful than Brazil. So this is the starting, beginning of the term of sub-imperialism. And I think after this, I think in Ghana as well, there are some intellectuals, they use this term to explain some of the developments in African continent. So sub-imperialism again became a term used quite widely by the African Marxist intellectuals. Until recently, these two sources were the main source of the term, and in the very recent past, the last 10 years or so, David Harvey, the well-known Marxist intellectual working in the United States, I think he's over 90 this year. David Harvey never used the term sub-imperialism, but he started to explain the conditions of emerging powers like Turkey. I'm starting with China, India, and then Turkey, Indonesia, South Korea, and then trying to explain them almost in a similar way, like Mauro Marini's definition, but David Harvey never used the term sub-imperialism itself. He was just saying that regional big powers, regional great powers. So according to David Harvey and many other Marxists use this, they call the global superpower or powers, and then in the second ranking level there are regional great powers, and they can act in the same imperialist way towards weaker states in their own region. So when Mauro Marini first initially developed this term, he was part of the wider dependency theory Marxists about Latin America. In the 1960s, a number of important names, one of them was André Gunder Frank, again the Marxist writer who died I think about 10 years ago. André Gunder Frank was he was married to a Chilean Marxist, and then during the short period of socialist experience before Pinochet came to Chile, André Gunder Frank was advising the president as well over there. So during this period, André Gunder Frank and a number of Latin American Marxists, they started to develop a theory which came to be known as dependency theory. So they are looking at the world as developed, industrialized, developed countries and underdeveloped countries. And then soon after, someone called Immanuel Wallerstein also adopted this, and Immanuel Wallerstein provided a structure saying that there are core, semi-periphery and periphery. So in the core, the most powerful state or states, and then semi-periphery is still powerful but not as powerful as the core ones, and then periphery, all those states which are weak, underdeveloped economies. So these dependency theory debates and the writings inspired Marini to develop this sub-imperialism. Right? But also when he was doing this, he used various definitions of imperialism from Hobson, Lenin, Bukharin, and Rosa Luxemburg. But I have to say that none of these use the term as we use now, sub-imperialism. So Roy Mauro Marini took their definition of imperialism and adapted this to second-level countries, not the top countries, second-level countries. So when, again, look a bit closely to how he described this, there are basically, I think, 5 characteristics if you look at Mauro Marini's definition. The one is, he's talking about this hierarchical structure, which is coming from the dependency theory writers. They explain there is a hierarchical structure in the world, always in the interstate system. Again, the top superpower countries are the most powerful. They control almost everything else, every economic, political, and military process in the world. And then at the very bottom, there are the underdeveloped countries, which came to be known as the third world countries until recently. So in this imperialist hierarchical structure, this sub-imperialist powers are in between the bottom ones and the top ones. So they are being still exploited by the top ones, but they also can exploit the ones below them. Again, the second characteristic is the dual role. So these countries, again, they can act like imperialist powers in their own region, but only as the big superpowers allow them to do this, or sometimes the regional competition, some great powers compete over a region, and this competition creates a vacuum, and in this vacuum these sub-imperialist powers can act to some extent independently on their own right. And third, again, the power dynamics in the regional arena is important. But for most of the time, these sub-imperialist powers, the middle ranking powers, they act in relation to one or the other great powers' projects in the region. Just like Turkey, Israel, acting for most of the time alongside with the American projects, or some other powers, again with China or in the past, a Soviet state in various places. The fourth, again, regional power dynamics, and these countries like Turkey is like that, Israel is like that, Iran is like that. In Africa, Nigeria and South Africa are like that. In Latin America, Brazil, to some extent Argentina. So they are the regional hegemons, and that's why many other authors, whether they are Marxist or not Marxist, they use the regional powerful states. They don't use the term sub-imperialist states, but instead they say regional powerful states, and they define the same thing, more or less the same thing. And internal development of 5 characteristics is important, because for those countries, in order to act like a sub-imperialist country in their region, first they need to develop their internal economic and political structure, especially capital accumulation, comes to a certain level which creates an economic power which makes them able to move out and then exploit the weaker powers in the region. And this economic accumulation comes first, almost every single examples. And the examples are like given by Marini, apart from Latin America, like India and Iran are examples. But now, as I said, in the 21st century, we have many more. Almost in every region there are a few countries we can call sub-imperialists. So as I said, these sub-imperialist powers economically quite strong in their own region, but not, of course, as strong, and they cannot compete with the great powers. Like, if you are talking about right now in the second decade of 20th or even third decade of 21st century, there is the United States, China, maybe European Union as a whole are great economic superpowers. But these sub-imperialist countries are much smaller than them, but still relatively they are the leading economic powers, and they can, and their companies and their corporations can afford to move out and to exploit the resources and the regional conditions wherever they are. And as I said, they generally act in relation to one or more than one great power's regional projects. For instance, Greater Middle Eastern project once tried to be put in practice in the Middle East. And along these, for instance, Israel was the key power, and then Turkey to some extent tried to be part of this grandiose project. And in other continents as well, either China's or United States or European Union's general or regional projects use some of the local powers in this condition. But there are also cases that, especially when the great powers, their competition creates a vacuum. And in that vacuum, in that void, these regional powers can act sometimes independently. But for most of the time, sub-imperialist countries are only functioning in the space given to them by a greater power. So again, the same thing, because they are not powerful enough to act in the global level, but in their own region they can, and they establish a kind of a power center, and from that power center they intervene and they exploit both economically, militarily, establishing bases. Their companies, their corporations go and even exploit the natural resources of weaker countries. And this process, the sub-imperialist countries' activities in the regions, also contributes to regional instability. So some of the current conflicts, even wars, competitions, are the result of these kind of sub-imperialist interventions by powerful regional countries. And some authors mentioned that this was similar to how some of the empires in the past were competing for regional domination, and they gave the example of Ottoman and Persian empires, and then later on in the Republican period, the competition between Turkey and Iran, and also Iran and Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. So this is basically a regional competition, but the way this regional competition happens or are exercised now through economic accumulation of the economic strength and exploitation, and that's why we can make a comparison between the definition of general imperialist exploitation. This is an imperialist exploitation at a smaller scale, because in imperialist exploitation at the global level, and this is on the regional level. And again, the real reason why these kind of sub-imperialist powers emerge and sub-imperialist interventions create rivalry, conflict, and the wars is because of the existing unequal global system. So the global interstate system, I mean the system now in the world as we describe, we can call it an interstate system because based on still states as main actors. In this interstate system, the positions, the locations are not equal, obviously. I mean the countries are not sitting around the table just like that. And there is a hierarchical structure. And in this hierarchical structure, the sources and the value and the shares are unequally distributed. And this unequal distribution emerges these kind of possibilities and opportunities for regional small powers. But they basically respect the existing hierarchical system, despite the fact that many of the leaders of these sub-imperialist countries, when they talk, they criticize the Western imperialism. They criticize the colonial system. And they appear to be as if they were anti-imperialist, anti-colonialists. But they are basically one of the main factors for the continuation of the existing hierarchical structure, because they have a position in this hierarchical structure which benefits them, opposed to those less powerful states, because they exploit them. I mean, this exploitation is the reason why some countries act like this. And as I said, they exercise this even though the first area is the economic area. So unless they reach that economic progress, development, or accumulation, sub-imperialism doesn't work. It comes with the economic concentration of the capital first, and then the capital goes abroad and intervenes, exploits, and uses the cheap labor and resources in other countries, but then it is followed by cultural, ideological, political, and military forces as well. So that's why when we look at the Turkey situation, especially in Africa and in the Middle East, we will see some of the most obvious examples are the military bases and military arrangements and the links and interventions in various parts of Africa. Mainly Somalia, but a number of other countries as well. I will give the examples, but the most expensive ones are in Somalia. So all this, so far we looked at the sub-imperialism as a general term. Now, if we look at Turkey, I think Turkey fits this sub-imperialist definition quite clearly, especially during the last over 20 years, almost like 30 years. Turkey developed a significant industrial economic base, and especially some companies in Turkey are now acting beyond the borders of Turkey in the region and even in other continents. And this economic power created the basis of the sub-imperialist interventions. So the Turkish companies are now investing in ports, in airports, in roads, even in mining in many other countries. All these are beyond the borders of Turkey, and especially in the Middle East and in many, in several increasingly more and more African countries. And we will see now the reason why this is happening, again, as we discussed at the one of the first slides, when we are looking about the definition of sub-imperialism, when the great powers compete with each other and then or sometimes withdraw from the region, and there emerges a vacuum, a power vacuum, then Turkey used this power vacuum quite successfully so far, especially in Africa. And the African countries are pushing away their former colonial masters just outside the continent. Turkey filled some of these gaps. So how it started? I think it goes to even before AKP came to power, but in my opinion, the main turning point was 2011, the beginning of Arab Spring events in North Africa and the Middle East. And remember, Turkey during those years was expecting some quick successes in Syria first, and then in Libya, and the intervention in Libya was, I think, quite significant to understand Turkey's role in Africa today. Because Turkey was first not sure what to do when the NATO powers intervened in the situation in Libya. But then soon after they just joined and became part of it. But then when the chaos emerged in Libya as a result of intervention after changing the regime and execution of the Gaddafi, and Turkey immediately put itself militarily supporting one side against the other, and still there. So I think that was maybe one of the first examples, one of the first occasions the Turkish foreign policy leaders and military tried their chances in Africa, and after that they expanded much faster. In Syria, it wasn't, as we all know, as easy as they were expecting. Ahmet Davutoğlu, as you remember, immediately after 2011 Arab Spring event started in Syria against Bashar al-Assad, Ahmet Davutoğlu was saying that within a few months we will go and have our Friday prayer in Damascus. But of course it took how many years? Exactly. So, I mean, again, in Syria, as a whole, if you look at the whole period and what happened afterwards, Turkey played an important role by providing training ground and even training and arming a certain group, which part of it came to power in Syria now, but they were expecting much clear-cut successes and victories in Syria. So that's why the real inroads for Turkish sub-imperialist drive happened in Africa, which I think for which I think the Libyan example is really important. I mean, if you study what happened in Libya in those days, and Turkey started and stood 2 steps back from the NATO first, and then they decided to intervene, and after the intervention, they realized they have a chance. So as I said, even before AKP, Turkey's opening up to Africa policy started. In 1998, Turkey launched an opening up to Africa policy. And in those days, especially with TİKA, that organization, they already started doing similar things in Central Asia. Remember, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, they taught all those Central Asian countries which speak a Turkic language, they can easily go and boss them around and establish their power bases, but which wasn't as easy as they were expecting. So around the same time, they also started to consider opening up in Africa and establishing some inroads. But in 1998, neither Turkish economy was that powerful, and therefore their resources were much more limited, and Turkish army wasn't as experienced in the international relations at that point, so nothing happened. But Ankara, the government in Ankara, before and after the AKP, always remained quite well aware of the importance of African continent. Like everybody else, I mean, Africa is considered probably more and more significant for the future in the world, and this was from the beginning of the 21st century as well. So when Erdogan came to power and started initiating an economic opening, and a number of companies very fast grew, and they wanted to to go out because they couldn't exploit anymore within the borders of Turkey. Erdogan declared even a year of Africa in 2005, and then hosted a summit 3 years after, Turkey-Africa Cooperation Summit. And around this time with Somalia, they started to develop relations, and Erdogan started going to African Union meetings, but especially the situation in Somalia, the chaotic situation and the need for help for them from outside provided Erdogan government an opportunity. So if you look at how they established their links and how they entered into these places, in many places it started even before the economic links, cultural links, education links, and especially Gülen movement was very powerful in many African places, as well as in Central Asia and in the Balkans. Many schools opened, many cultural centers opened, and Erdogan, in these contexts, the government particularly, they considered Somalia was a weak spot in Africa, because also the Western powers remained quite a distant from Somalia. The situation was quite unclear and unstable, and this the crisis in Somalia, nobody wanted to be part of it except the AKP government. So in this context, a number of organizations, Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TİKA, which emerged immediately after 1991, first mainly looking at the Turkic people in Central Asia, but TİKA very important, became very important in Africa too. Of course, Turkish Airlines, Kızılay, and a number of non-governmental organizations like Humanitarian Relief Foundation. They were supported by the government fully to expand, to establish links in Somalia. And at that point, because Somalia was in a desperate situation, they all welcomed all this kind of anything coming from outside. And as I said, the political and economic crisis existing in Somalia at that point kept the American and major Western powers away from Somalia, which was a great opportunity for Turkish leadership. So that was a multi-layered policy, going with culture, going with religion, going with education, and going through economic and charity interventions, and which was followed soon after by military links, first advising their armies, their security forces, and then gradually establishing bases, and even helping them, arming them against any kind of resistance within the country. And all these went hand in hand. I remember it was during the time when Ahmet Davutoğlu was the Prime Minister. So in those days I just started going back to Turkey because our court case finalized, and I found a solicitor who cleared all the things, and I started going to Turkey. And one university in Istanbul invited me to a conference about Turkey's foreign policy in Africa and in Central Asia. So I went there, and then they said that the key person of this conference, the keynote given by Ahmet Davutoğlu. So at lunch, because I was the only person coming from outside of Turkey, and someone told me, or saying that, Mr. Davutoğlu wants you to go and sit at his table. So I went to the table of Ahmet Davutoğlu, And we were talking, and then a young woman came. I would also say, oh, this is my daughter, she's studying international relations, so we talk about this. And then they asked me, do you have a daughter, do you have children? I said, no, I have children, but my eldest daughter was, at that point, my eldest daughter was studying Spanish and Portuguese with politics in Edinburgh. So I told him, and I told her, I said, oh, when she finishes, just tell her, come to me, I have a job for her, because we are opening embassies, not only in Africa and Asia, but also in Latin America. So, I mean, of course, I don't tell other anything about this, because I didn't want to get involved, but at that point, they were in that mind. They were expanding everywhere, and they thought they can do this. I think there was this ambition over there, maybe too confident, and some of these overconfidence disappeared, but the ambition remained there after the auto, although even after 2016 coup attempt. So Turkey's presence in Africa wasn't only just establishing a military base, or wasn't only just linking with Muslim sections of the African population, but also Turkey is trying to use this as part of a geopolitical power competition. They are trying to establish a space for themselves, being one of the key powerful actors in this emerging continent where everyone is watching now, being the major place in the 21st century. And this expansion in Africa, in this expansion, Somalia is maybe one of the most extreme cases, but not the only place. I mean, why Somalia? If we say why Somalia, because, I mean, not only because Somalia's instability and chaos, but also the location is so significant for Turkey. I mean, as you can see, Somalia sits on the Gulf of Aden, at the entrance of the Red Sea and Suez Canal. There is a shipping lane connecting Mediterranean and Indian Ocean, so Somalia is a very well-located, great location if anyone would like to establish a political, economic and military power base in the region of Middle East and North and East Africa. So Turkey identified from the start this Somalia as a strategic location, but also as a location where they can easily benefit both economically and politically. And as I said, what helped to Turkey was because the Western countries was too busy in many other places at that point, and they didn't want to get involved in uncertainty and chaos, almost like anarchic situation in Somalia. So this created an opportunity for Turkey, and once they established themselves, now it is difficult to kick them out. So now even the greater powers, they couldn't go and kick the Turkish presence there. And Turkey around this time also attempted to exert influence through various links in other African countries like Cameroon, South Africa and Congo. And many of these countries had strong links with the other great powers, and that's why the Turkey's presence in those countries either remained at a cultural level or some small-scale economic links were established, but not as strong as what happened in Somalia. So if you look at Africa, I mean, there is probably the major power in Africa in all these things was China. China, in terms of the economic intervention, economic links, and economic investment, is of course much bigger than Turkey's investment. But in Somalia, it is Turkey. So Turkey kind of created it itself, just almost like pulling everything and then creating a space, but a strategically important space in Africa. So, and from there, they are also still attempting to expand to other places, and there are still schools, some economic links, and some of the Turkish companies, construction companies, mining companies, I have a few examples, active in other African countries around Somalia as well. So in the Middle East too, like in 2016, a Turkish military base was established in Qatar. Army, Navy, Air Force, and Special Forces units, and also they were advising and training the Qatari army. So again, Qatar is a very important location in the Middle East. Persian Gulf, Indian Ocean, and Arabian Sea. So from Qatar, Turkey has access to all these places, and also Turkey is in touch with all the other oil-rich small states in that region because of their presence in Qatar, like Bahrain, Kuwait, and United Arab Emirates. But the links in this whole region, again, as I said, the most important links are with Somalia. Even before 2011 Arab Spring events, they already signed a contract, a cooperation contract with the Somalian army, the leading generals. And according to these agreements, Turkey established military training bases for Somalian National Army, and they also signed an education agreement, a 49-year education agreement to influence, to support, to structure the Somalian education system. And many Somalian students were given funding to go and study in Turkey. So in this way, as we can see, the Turkey uses the soft power of education, soft power of cultural and ideological influences very successfully. First through the Gülen schools and Gülen establishments, and then, of course, after 2016, the government took over many of these things. They are still continuing in the same, on the same basis. So, as I said, this is a multi-level relationship. In addition to a military base, Turkey also established several hospitals, many schools, built roads, water wells, and provided lots of technical expertise in the agricultural field, and continuously trained and still training the security forces in Somalia. So all these humanitarian interventions, as well as cultural help and help in building their infrastructure, goes hand in hand with the military presence of Turkish army and Turkish security forces in Somalia. So through these, also Turkish companies went there, and they got lots of projects and made huge amount of profits, because Somalia, despite its chaos and instability, has huge resources as well. It's a very wealthy country in terms of what is under the ground. So in 2017 in Mogadishu, a Camp Tucson camp opened. Camp Tucson, it's a huge military facility. It's a very big military, Turkey's largest overseas military facility in Somalia. And this military facility also played the role of almost like a base to expand to other places in Africa. So they use this for training the Somalian army, training Somalian security forces, but also linking the other possible places and possible powers in the region. So by 2025, by the beginning of this year, more than 10,000 Somalian soldiers trained in that camp, Camp Tucson, and special forces, special commander units were trained and established again in this camp by the Turkish trainers and Turkish officers. So even though all these were under the Somalian military structure, but they were totally dependent on Turkey and Turkish army in terms of training, weaponry and logistics. So, and all now there are even more or further, even high-tech, more high-tech development in the region. We will, I think I will look at one of the other slices. They are now satellite base happening in Somalia. The agreement already signed and the construction already started. So all these also are, were strengthened by signing official agreements, like Defense and Economic Cooperation Agreement signed in 2024. And Turkey provided maritime jurisdictional areas, so that really significant and very strategic sea on the eastern side. Now Turkey controls as a result of this agreement, and the Somalian Navy is almost totally under Turkish control in that region. So in 2025, 3 attack helicopters and 2 utility helicopters given to Somalia, and other military weaponry and equipment also the Somalian government bought from Turkey. So all these things continuously going over there, which also supports the Turkish military industry as well. So there were Turkish soldiers in that Camp Tucson, and also they were acting alongside with the Somalian forces against the anti-government guerrillas, namely Al-Shabaab group acting in certain parts of Somalia. So on top of this, this is the most recent and most high-tech one. The Turkey is establishing a spaceport in Somalia, and it will function as a kind of an orbital launch site for satellites. So Turkey launch satellites from there, but also Turkey can use this spaceport to test long-range ballistic missiles, such as Typhoon missile system. So this project, managed by Turkey's space agency, according to an agreement signed with Somalian government for defense and economic agreement. So this base was also located at a very significant, strategically important point, which also made it possible to send satellites from that location, because the closeness to the equator. I think the experts say that this location was deliberately chosen, and when it happened in the many international space technology magazines, there were lots of articles saying that this is one of the perfect locations for any power trying to use this as a launching satellite launching base. So this construction of this spaceport already started in December 2024, and still continuing, probably will finish very, very soon. I think there is, in English language or literature, that there is plenty of things about this. I am not sure how in the Turkish newspapers do they talk about this spaceport, because many English language sources talk about this quite extensively, saying that this is almost like none of the big powers in the West were expecting anything like that from Turkey-Somali cooperation.
Yeah, I mean, having a space program from a failed state is quite a feet.
Yeah. And also this base is established in such a way that, I mean, it's a huge area and a very strategic location, and also it is going to be used for testing long-range ballistic missiles. So this is also very significant strategically. So behind the region where Somalia is located, the Turkey also entering into various links, and this was related to recent kicking out the France from the region, from a number of countries in the Sahel region, especially. So Russia is in that region, but because of the difficulties in the war in Ukraine, they limited their activity, and a number of governments like Mali, Niger, they kicked the French forces out of the country, and now Turkey is there and talking to them, and some of them already established some links. And many of these countries, they don't see Turkey as an imperialist power. I think this is the benefit of being a sub-imperialist or formerly underdeveloped country. And especially for this region, the Turkish government and Turkish companies are so clever, they are entering the region with cultural and economic investment first. And they go there, they use in some of the countries, they use the religious connections, and they are establishing schools, they are establishing cultural centers, they are establishing youth programs, and after that comes the military links and the economic links. So for that reason, many of these countries, when you look at the actual statements of the Somalian government or these governments of the Sahel region, they talk about Turkey almost like a friendly country, and they don't see this as a kind of exploitation, like a former colonial exploitation. So Turkish companies are very active in that region, especially defense companies. So Baykar, Roketsan, Asfat, STM, all these had links not only in Somalia, in other countries as well, especially during the last couple of years. These advances increase in many places in relation to how they moved and developed their technological base. I mean, Turkey in general as an economy still middle level, using middle level technology, not high level technology, but these defense companies, they are using the highest technology. I mean, they are the only sector in Turkey which are at the highest level in terms of the technology they use. And this is helping them in various African and Middle Eastern places. So as I said, they also use, maybe even before the military and economic interventions, they use the soft tools like media, cultural communication, schools, social centers, youth clubs, and TRT Africa, for instance, was launched in 2023. TRT Africa is now, since then, become probably one of the most popular TV channels in many African countries. And another agency, Yunus Emre Institute, and many Turkish series are now even bought and shown in their local TV channels too, as well as using the social media and a number of other media tools in these countries. So as a result of this, all these things create a sympathetic view of Turkey in those countries. And again, I think whether someone is sitting there and planning all these up to the final detail or not, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it seems all these are working. hand in hand and supporting each other, military intervention being supported by all these soft tools used by many Turkish official agencies as well as some non-official charities in the same way. So on top of this comes the so-called energy cooperation. Because what we call energy cooperation, they are exploiting the rich mineral and energy resources in African countries. So especially when it is hydrocarbon resources, the Turkish companies are there, and they had an agreement with Somalian government, Turkish-Somali hydrocarbon exploration and production agreement. This was signed between the Turkish Petroleum Corporation and Somali Petroleum Authority. So the Turkish company has the right to develop and to exploit the Somalian energy resources. So, and as you can see, there is a huge potential here. According to BBC, Turkish had a number of programs talking about the Turkey's entrance into Africa. And I mean, I just put here one sentence, but in BBC Turkish, if you go and look, they have interviews and they have statements from both sides, and they have even pictures of various of these projects happening there. And Turkish construction companies, another sector, on top of the defense sector, they are making huge inroads in Africa. Renaissance Holding and Enka Holding, they have now projects in Senegal, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Tanzania. So they are building highways, ports, railroads, power plants, as well as a number of major government buildings. And this information is from Financial Times last year, in 2024. So they are also building in those, when the Turkish companies or Turkish energy corporation, Turkish Petroleum, and the government sign an energy cooperation deal, these construction companies go there and they were given the right to build the framework in order to make this energy cooperation to work. So in Angola, for instance, Tosyala Holding has partnered with the Angolan company Sonangol to establish an integrated iron and steel facility because they have a huge, very rich iron ore reserves in one region of Angola. Again, a Turkish company is now developing this. This is again from Reuters 2024. So all these examples, and I chose just a few examples here. If you just search in Google search, there's a huge amount of information on Turkey's role in Africa. There are so many newspaper articles, so many short commentaries, sometimes analysis in Financial Times, Reuters, BBC Turkish, and those TV channels, website, you are watching that financial channel. So they have so much information happening, especially during the last 5-6 years, because this economic entering, the Turkish companies entering the continent is now going faster and faster and with more confidence in more and more countries.
Who's financing these projects?
Well, they are getting the finance mainly from the local sources, but those, those economic interventions are very profitable because they are establishing a base, a relationship, and in order to take the natural resources out, and this brings a huge amount of profit both to the local government and to the company working in those places.
And the old colonial powers, are they letting them Yes.
All colonial powers in many of these spaces are in difficulty. I mean, the new power, China is doing this maybe 10 times more than this in many other countries. China is much bigger in Africa intervention, and mainly economic intervention by China. But I mean, France and United States, Belgium, England, they are losing their ground in Africa more and more.
That's what I'm trying to say. They must be very sore because they are losing all these. It's their old playgrounds.
Exactly, but
and
also
to see that to lose to China is one thing.
Exactly.
But to lose to Turkey, all these advantageous, profitable lines and everything else.
But also, I think that if you look at the last 10 years or so, most of the Western powers are economically and financially in trouble. And then on top of this, this war in Ukraine now, I mean, a large amount of resources going there to support the Ukrainian side. So many of these countries are not really looking at Africa, also because they are very much involved in many other things. And even the strongest power in Europe, Germany, is now declining economically. They are not in any position of going there and competing Turkey at the moment.
Nevertheless, I mean, Turkey, when you compare Turkey's economic base, you can't compare it to Germany's or to Britain's or France's. It's far less in terms of capital, for example. So what you are saying is that they're actually generating much of the capital required for these kind of projects locally.
Much of these projects are companies. They are not the Turkish state. I mean, these Tosyalı Holding or Enka, Renaissance Holding, or those defense companies, they are all, I mean, defense companies work hand in hand with the state, but all the others, I mean, they are just like having any international corporation. And they found this area and they are going there, investing and expecting and getting their investment paid. So it's not the Turkish state going and spending large amount of money over there. So what Turkish state is doing is focusing on the economic side and the soft power side. And most of the soft power things don't really cost that much money. Many of them already started even before 2016 by Gülen movement, schools and youth centers, clubs, various things open, and the state is continuing this.
On top of this, think about the Sahel region. Take it from Egypt, Sudan, Chad, Niger, North Nigeria, Mauritania, Mali, Senegal. All of them are Muslim countries. And France is losing power there. So Turks are going there as Muslim brothers. The president was holding a speech in Senegal. Turks in Senegal, I can never remember his history. He was saying, brothers, we have been brothers throughout history, just to expel the French, because French have been horrible colonial power, and the history does not give any positive response to France from these Muslim peoples. And in Niger, nobody talks about it. Turkey is on top of the biggest uranium mine in whole Africa. Turkey has nuclear ambitions, as any other country has. And Turkey tries to control the huge uranium mines which French are forced to leave now. So what happens is the Turkish state goes in there as Muslim brothers. We give you our friendly hand. Then, for example, in Ethiopia there is a civil war. and Turks say, we can give you drones. Turkish state says, we can give you drones, and then Bayraktar Holding comes and helps Ethiopian government.
Yeah.
The same with Somalia, the same with Mali, Mauritania, which are very important countries.
So I finally conclude now, and then we can elaborate and continue. So basically, Turkish state, by these military, cultural, and economic links in Africa, increasing its presence in Africa. But again, the important thing is, because during the same period, the global powers, the former colonial powers, are withdrawing or competing with each other, China and United States and new powers. And when all this created either as a result of withdrawal or as a result of competition, created an area, a vacuum, and Turkey very cleverly, and as Ismail said, using the religious connection, using the other soft powers, trying to fill this vacuum. And as you can see, like, because I mean, we all witnessed the last 12 months or so, witnessed one by one all the Sahel regimes kick the French out, and the United States engagement in many places again backfired. In Libya, for instance, I mean, Turkey is the only organized power in Libya now. I mean, the side of Libya which was supported by Turkish government seems to be the only organized. Looks like a state in Libya, because all the others they didn't want to sacrifice anymore, because when they saw the resistance, this serious resistance. So as a result, Turkey established a regional base to increase its influence in the area. So finally, can we call this as a kind of colonialism?
Well, it's neocolonialism.
So,
No.
yeah, exactly. So I think it is many people writing about this. They consider this as a different kind of exploitation than the Western colonial legacy. But if you look at exactly what the Turkish companies and Turkish military and all these were doing in this, especially in terms of for instance, mining is a very important area. And the Turkish companies are so active in the mining. So, to me, it's a very colonial intervention. I mean, they go to those countries and they offer good deals, and they provide some technology and the expertise, and then they say, okay, you are not in a position of developing your own resources. It's just a waste at the moment. Also, the European colonial powers, as you know, they always exploit you and they didn't give you anything. So we are here and we give you a 50-50 share or a better share, like 60-40 share. Most of the time they offer reasonably better shares to the local authorities. And as a result of this, the Turkey is now playing the same role. Even though, I mean, the colonial legacy in Africa is very brutal, as we know, the Belgians, the French, British, they all, they all killed, tortured so many people. I mean, much bigger than the Nazi killings happened in Congo by the Belgian regime. Yeah,
Congo, South Africa.
Exactly, all these places. So comparing with that experience, so far Turkey is there as a partner. Many of the African people, they see Turkey as a brother, Muslim partner.
So I was going to say, I mean, much of the original, first colonialism experience that the Africans had, Latin Americans had, has been based on racism, subjugation of the indigenous populations, subjugating to different cultural practices and religions, bringing Christianity essentially by force, and torture and killing. And it was brutal. It was very bloody. So this is another form of colonialism in a way.
But without the brutality, also without racism,
Yeah.
Without, I mean, so far we don't have any evidence that the Turkish companies, the Turkish personnel are looking down at them, like the
But
white
today is
Western
child
people.
labor, for example.
And using Islamic finance capital.
Yeah.
Remember, Islamic, from Qatar to UAE, Saudi Arabia, why not? Islamic and finance capital, they have the money, Turks have the power, market. So Qatar pours all their money to Turkish stock exchange now. The same with the Saudis or the others.
So I want to
We
finish.
are all brothers.
I want to finish one anecdote. Just recently, when we decided to do this seminar, when we prepared the poster, so I sent the poster to one of my former students who is now a professor, and he's well. If there was, let's say, JFK at the head of Turkey, then obviously then you wouldn't talk about the sub-imperialism. And I said, no, this is not nothing to do with who is in the leadership position or not. For instance, Brazil was doing the same sub-imperialist following sub-imperialist foreign policy under Lula. Lula is a socialist. It is independent of who is in the power or not, because it's not depending on the ruling party or ruling elite or the leader of the country. But many people in Turkey, even a Marxist academic like this, sees things through that simple identification of all these things happening. If something negative happening, then it's because of this Islamic government. And if the Islamic government disappears, then everything goes back to normal and everything nice and plenty. So I want to finish with this, because I just had this argument a few days ago when I sent this poster saying that, look, Emre, we are doing this, and then he called me and he asked me this question. We did it in chat.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, how many years ago, 1980s, in the İşçi Lisesi, Rüştü Yurkoğlu was saying it, that we are an imperialist country, not one of the capitalists. At the same time, all the other left was saying that capitalism is not developed in Turkey. But
And still, I think just before the seminar, we were in the cafe. Ismail was telling me that some of the, I mean, just currently, just
The
recently,
best-selling magazine,
Last
the
one.
author says,
Last one day.
we are not half colonial, semi-colonial. We are a colonial country. We are colony, she says, in November issue of the magazine.
Which year?
I will tell you later. But she says some of our leftist friends just lift their eyebrows when we say about colony. Of course, Turkey is a sömürge colony, she says. This is crazy. They don't know how to read the statistics. When Yurikoğlu said that Turkey was now an imperialist country in year 2000, Turkey's exports for the whole year was $27.7 billion. Just in October, Turkey's exports was $24 billion this year. So Turkey plans to have 400 billion dollars worth exports. There are many problems, but they have huge economy now, which is a powerful economy in many areas. There are many, of course, problems here and there, but Turkey is a major imperialist power. But the others don't let Turkey. Israel and America, they just say, oh, stop. Russians don't want it too powerful. Nobody wants a powerful Turkey. When you read about the import materials, almost 70% of all import goes to energy, gas and oil. So Turkey eyes Rakka oils, Rakka petrols, Kirkuk, Mosul. If Turkey gets any of these, that's it. They will say, okay, we are in the paradise now. We are an imperialist power. Like the Germans in 1930s said the same. If they had Caucasian oil, they could rule the whole world. That is imperialism. Yeah. So somebody says no.
Shall we have a coffee break now? And then some questions and comments. Thank you. Sumar, would like to talk about Cyprus in this context.
Yeah, I mean, hearing Turkey's role as sub-imperialist country, and all these things, especially its expansionist policies, investment in African region, for me this goes way back, even more than 30 years. In fact, I may not be wrong to say that all this little imperialist country, as a well-defined sub-imperialist country, Cyprus has been a kind of training ground. Training ground in multiple ways, although Turkey's intervention had some legality because Turkey was one of the guarantors, and since the Republic of Cyprus was in danger, put in danger by the Greek juntas, and Britain decided not to intervene, Turkey used her rights to intervene. That was a very legitimate action. In fact, even early days of invasion, well supported by the Greek Cypriot communists, because the EOK fascists also killing not only Turks but also the Greek Cypriot communists as well. And then after first intervention, it was the second, and throughout many years, the federal solution was mainly supported. It was mainly a Turkish proposition for the Cyprus problem. Since even Republic of Cyprus, in terms of constitution, in terms of state collapse, during from early 60s. But what had changed? Declaration of Northern Republic of Cyprus. In a way, what Turkey had legitimate rights to be there, automatically cut it off. And now it's, I mean, especially the last 5 years, 10 years, it's been much more dangerous position for not only Turkey's interest, but also the Turkish Cypriot existence as well. I mean, when we look at the way that Turkey launched its sort of expansionism, imperialistic things, yeah, I mean, it was easy because we are brothers and sisters. Not brothers and sisters. Now we are saying that, or the politicians are saying that it's the yavru vatan, the mother and child relationship, which puts Turkish Cypriots in a sort of
second class.
Not only second class, büyümemiş, yavru daha çocuk. But one of the things that first they did was literally through privatization, collapsing, closing all the all the local industries, and more creating a very strong dependency to Turkey in many ways, in terms of little industry, in terms of agriculture, and even it reached to that extent that when you close the tap, north part of Cyprus will have not a drop of water, because the water comes directly from Turkey. One of the recent things, by the present government, they made an agreement, 25 years agreement with Türk Telekom. Already has an infrastructure with telecommunication, not one company, but few companies. And without announcing in public, ihaleye çıkmadan, directly given to Türk Telekom. And when we look at who is Türk Telekom, we go to Saray. I mean, Tayyip Erdoğan is one of the shareholders. I mean, what does it mean? It means that you will be cut off. You will be constantly controlled. Listen. And probably one of the most profitable thing, more than Somalia or anywhere else, money laundering.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to invest anything.
Yeah.
You only need to invest to have casinos. Casinos, well, place as a laundry. And not long ago, if I'm not wrong, there are 35 hotels and casinos, and they're doubling that. I mean, there's a lack of tourism. Okay, is it a state thing? No, it's the companies, it's the industries.
Exactly. I think this is the key.
I mean, and also through what? Through consent. As they are doctrinating Islamic language and Islamic heritage and African countries, in Cyprus they are doing in two ways. One is bringing settlers, more people from Turkey, giving them nationality and residency rights and everything, and there's a shift of population, but it goes two ways. They're using the nationalistic language, brotherhood language in terms of Turkish thing, and the other strong growing thing is the Islamic, because unfortunately there's a really increasing, really growing Islamification in the island. Therefore, they don't need to impose things. People are saying, welcome, we need this, we need that. And these are the things that I would say that, yeah, they are well trained through companies and through their ideological expansionist policies and strategies. Yeah, I mean,
I think what you say definitely makes sense. Also, it is related to what I discussed with my former student about it's not a matter of who is in power or not. Because all this sub-imperialism, just like in the real imperialism, firstly requires accumulation of a certain level of capital. And this takes us back to Karl Marx. I think there is that paragraph in Karl Marx. I was trying to find out from my notes, but it will take ages. I use them in some of the past seminars. I always use it. I don't remember exact word, but Marx basically said that capital, when reaches a certain level of accumulation, then requires to move.
Yeah.
To move anywhere, wherever in the world, when there is more profit margin, when there's wherever rate of profit is high, capital goes there. It doesn't matter how much borders, how much border control, how much tax, how much things you do. It doesn't matter. Capital always finds a way of going out. And it has to do this. Otherwise, capital cannot survive. Because according to Marx's definition, capital has to recreate itself always at a higher level. So if the Turkish capital says, okay, we earn enough, now we are continuing like this, we are not going to move, we are not going to grow anymore, then they will start to decline. Because this is the rule of the capital. Is
global market.
Exactly. So therefore, Cyprus at that point offered this opportunity. Okay, but of course the Turkish companies were not as big as they are now, and that opportunity remains at a limited level. But they tried it, as you said, it's almost like a training ground for a number of companies. And the second point you mentioned is also very important. This needs support or ground provided by the political authority. For instance, there is one American, I think one of the American neocons mentioned this. I think someone called Thomas Friedman. It's not the economist Friedman. Thomas Friedman is a major editor of a newspaper in 2000s and one of the founders of the neoconservative ideology, which was the ideology of the Bush administration. And Thomas Friedman says something saying that, look, McDonald's cannot survive without the support of McDouglas. McDouglas is the name of the major military aeroplane and investment company. So what he means that the American Army, the American Air Force, the American Navy, these are essential ingredients of our capitalist growth and expansion. And in Turkish case as well. So without the state's direct support, either eliminating any kind of competition, just giving it to them, or providing the ground by using the army, by using the state's facilities and sources first, is essential for this. So if you leave those companies, okay, this is a free world, this is a free competition, just go and do it. They cannot do this. Because their state and whatever behind them, they have to support them at every stage of the process. And in this sense, yeah, I agree with you on that.
Just think about Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. Turkey has got a leverage there. That's it. Turkish industry in the military showed their superb power, they said. Now, Turkey uses everywhere. Look at our drones, what we have done. So we created peace. This is how they behave. My question is this: is Cyprus a colony or not?
Yeah, of course. Cyprus is Turkey's colonies, and probably one of the left-wing party organization, it was Işçi who said in early 80s that Cyprus is a colony of Turkey.
Cyprus is out of the international law. Nobody recognizes them. That's why all bloody things running out there.
It's not
Turkey is using this now.
Yeah, I mean, now there is a very big power gains going on, especially surrounds the Cyprus and the gas and the oil in that region. Unfortunately, last 10 years, the ground for the Cyprus solution and everything, it's been left. And they said, oh, Greeks are not interested for solution, therefore we argue for independent state. For me, it's a very stupid, very ignorant, and the childishness of their understanding of the region and the Cyprus problem. Turkey's role in that there comes from the sort of by international laws that keeps Turkey there legitimately. And by removing that and rejecting all your rights will put Turkey in a very difficult position, which it is a very difficult position now, especially recently the Cyprus government made an agreement with Lebanon. Therefore, Lebanon, Israel, Egypt for the sea region, adding that to Greece, France, USA, Britain already has their bases and so on. In a way, Turkey is completely excluded,
Contained.
and really pushed. To all Turkey's desire to be there in Cyprus in a strategic position with this new economical, not only economical, also military. I mean, the Cyprus government made a military agreement with Israel. Even all this time, at this time of Gaza, it shows how confident they are and how well they made their connections with the lack of Turkish Cypriot and Turkish wrong policies in the region. I don't know, I mean, Turkey is looking at the gas somewhere else, but like next door to her, it's going to go and probably it's gone. I mean, it's not only economical thing, but also in terms of peace. Turkey is not going to sit quiet. It doesn't matter how strong and how weak it is, and it doesn't even depend on to the Islamist government. I'm more scared from CHP more than the others, because the nationalistic strength is more on the other side.
Greece made an agreement with European Union to export Cyprus natural gas to Europe.
Not only Greece, it started from recently Lebanon. It's been hanging last 20 years, they never signed it. And because of new changes of the area, and especially Lebanon expected something. And from January, Cyprus is going to do the leadership of the European Union. Therefore, I believe there are very strong agreements that Lebanon is going to receive lots of funds from Europe. Therefore, they signed it. Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, all that south. Not only that, it puts in a very difficult position of Turkey accessing to Libya, because it was a sort of a narrow gate connecting through sea, but now that there's a huge block, it's a region, it's an area that pregnant to many dangers.
Militarily, it is not a threat to Turkey to follow this narrow line. Israel cannot fight the Turkey. Lebanon, under the threat by the Israel, by signing the agreement.
They're not interested to fight, but it leaves nothing, no option to Turkey. Either it's going to say, sorry, we lost this battle, or do something crazy.
Two issues I want to ask you. One of them, I have heard that the Israeli people buy lands in Cyprus.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a flock of people who are coming and buying.
Yeah.
Like a Philistine.
Number two, the second one is, you know that all these islands with Greece. Asian islands.
Yeah.
And the US made a lot of military, what do you call it?
Operations.
Not operations.
No,
bases.
Yeah.
Bases. And it seemed to me that Turkey is already under the surveillance in a way that they might push it out from the NATO, etc. Do you feel like that?
I don't, because I think the West and US is not in a strong position right now in the global balance of power, and they have even also expressed this very openly, and this explains why Trump is so supportive of Erdogan in all speeches, because they need Turkey on their side. So kicking Turkey out of NATO, I don't think in the current climate that is even a small possibility. Maybe things may change in future. I mean, if let's say, if this Ukrainian conflict sorted out by peace, and maybe they arrange their relations with China by some economic agreements, and maybe in 10 years' time, if there is a regional conflict emerges in the Mediterranean, then maybe the situation may change. But currently, Turkey is not, there's no such risk for Turkey like being pushed out by the Western powers. I mean, yes, the regional powers, Israel, Egypt, Lebanon, Cyprus, and of course Greece. I mean, they may try to do this, but the big powers above them, they want to keep Turkey at the moment within NATO and pull it even more and more to the western side.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your question about the Israeli investment, yes, it has been quite some time, probably the last 20 years. Yeah, there's a huge investment in Cyprus, in both sides, the north as well as the south. And it's only recently, this year, it's been highlighted, especially with the Gaza problem and so on.
So it's not because of Gaza, it is even before Gaza, it already started.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back almost 20 years, even more. But also the Greek Cypriot government's close ties with Netanyahu and so on created also opposition to highlight this rising problem. It's a huge investment, and it's in both sides. And yeah, I mean, as I said, it's a danger, but yeah, I mean, somehow all the calculation goes excluding Turkey from the pipeline, yeah, it's a sort of challenge in many ways, because Turkey's involvement with Syria, with the strength and positioning, it's and the sort of Israel and Syria's thing, and it's a sort of pushing that it will be a sort of a bargaining point.
And also, I mean, what you said shows that the clash of two sub-imperialist powers in the region, Israel and Turkey.
Yeah.
What about Iran? Turkey's relations with
Again, I think Iran is a kind of sub-imperialist power, but because of Iran's huge problems with the United States, with Israel, and recently, especially during the last 2 years, all the hit taken by Hezbollah and Iran. So Iran at the moment is not in a position of openly competing, but in general, Iran is a contender of being a regional sub-imperialist power as well. So potentially there are two sub-imperialist powers in the region, I mean, or even four. I mean, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, and Israel.
But Iran's relationship with, or Turkey's relationship with Iran, is it amicable or is it?
Not really. They always compete about regional influence. I think. Imran?
It seemed to me that while
5 more minutes, isn't it?
while you were speaking about Somalia, for example, as one example, I mean, their love to Turkey is huge.
Yeah.
Whenever I use the station car in my area, most of them are Somalian or Turkish. They understand that I'm from Turkey. Oh, Erdogan, you know, they love the guy. But there's other groups like Egypt, for example. They have relationship with the Ottomans, and they have the whole idea about Turks. And it seemed to me that they will not siding with Turkey, but they, like the Europeans, and because the Ottomans' names is not very infamous, is not very lovable name, because the İpek Yolu, the Silk Road, and the other roads, whatever, it was very alive. When the Ottomans come along, this area is become quite dead. They have a very
different
historical experience compared with the other African countries. I think this is very important, because African countries, as you mentioned the names, is really looking for some leading
Because
figures.
many of them had no historical experience with
Exactly.
Ottoman Turks.
Yeah,
And Libya has got, but because of the conditions in Libya, they were desperate
yeah.
for any kind of help. Yeah.
And
Gaddafi.
Gaddafi studied in the Turkey
I see.
in military.
So, shall we stop now?
No, stop.
Okay, I think thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.